It is Tuesday, August 1st, 2017. We are looking at the Merrimack River as it flows alongside of Newburyport, Massachusetts. Newburyport this week is celebrating Yankee Homecoming Days, which is one whole week of vendors and displays that happens every year at this time. We're going to be going to the Universalist Unitarian Church, where there's a display of ship models by the Merrimack Valley Ship Model Club. And here we see some of the street vendors set up for the Yankee Homecoming Days. And over here is the church steeple of where our Merrimack Valley Model Ship Club is going to be showing all of our model displays. Here's our banner for the Merrimack Valley Ship Model Club with our free exhibit out on the church fence. It's a beautiful little church. Just in case the banner didn't do it, we have a few other signs guiding you. Hey, and we're here.
This is the Archibald Russell. This is kind of a classic shipping bottle. This is in a hand-blown bottle. The scale's about 41 feet to the inch. It's kind of satisfying to see all that sail on a kind of ship that was near the end of the great days of sailing ships. She would have carried grain from Australia to Europe and traveled all around the world. She was built in 1904 and broken up in 1949. New York merchant ship. I made this for the bicentennial of the War of 1812, and it's a classic example of the kind of ship that would have carried American cargoes and expanded the United States maritime interests around the world. It was designed by Christian Berg and launched in 1806, and fortunately we had the sail plan and her hull lines and a lot of detail on her. Unfortunately, what we don't have is her name. Very often American ships like this would have been built and carrying their first cargoes to Europe or to Russia and would have been sold. And that's possibly what happened with this. So this is the Sparkman and Stevens yawl Dorade. She's named for the famous ventilator that was Sparkman and Stevens invented for this. She won the Fastnet race in 1930 and is still afloat and winning races today. She is the one that established Olin Stevens' reputation as a designer. So this ship needs little introduction. She is, of course, old Ironsides, the famous famous frigate that, as they say, fought 40 battles and won them all. She's still afloat today and is the flagship of the American home fleet. Just went back in the water this past Sunday night.
Oldest commissioned vessel in...
Yes, oldest commissioned vessel in the world. This is the privateer Lynx, built by William Price in 1812. It's a typical example of the kind of privateer which was active in the War of 1812, commerce raiding and driving up the insurance rates for British merchants. This is 1/16 of an inch to the foot, and an interesting way to try and represent a classic ship model in a slightly more convenient size.
When you're ready.
Okay. Half Moon was Henry Hudson's famous ship for his third voyage of exploration. He was supposed to be looking for the Northwest Passage, but he headed further south and discovered the river that now bears his name. This is at 1/4 inch to the foot and built for my father-in-law, who believed he was descended from Henry Hudson, but it's quite unlikely he was.
All these little guys.
Okay, this is USS Knox, a Ray Crean scratch-built model built in Seattle, Washington in 1969. USS Knox was the first of a new class of 46 destroyer escorts. She served on the Pacific for her entire career. Redesignated a frigate in 1975, the ship earned a total of 8 campaign ribbons between 1969 and 1995, the year she was decommissioned. Marble Ray Crean designed this model in Microsoft Paint and printed it on cardstock. This is USS Fulham. Ray Crean is the builder. This is a modified kit, scale 1 to 350. USS Fulham was a Fletcher-class destroyer in the United States Navy during World War II and launched on April 16, 1942 in the Boston Navy Yard. Fulham participated in the assault on the Marianas, the Philippine Sea, the attack on Palau Islands, and the invasion of Iwo Jima. She earned 7 battle stars for her service. This is a Shoppi Schooner built by Kevin Cody, actually the president of our little group here at the Merrimack Valley Ship Model Club. This is a kit, scale 3/8 of an inch to a foot. The Shoppi Schooner is one of the terrapin schooners developed in the late 1800s and used well into the 20th century for turtle fishing along the Florida and Gulf Coast. In this capacity, these boats were fitted out as smacks, having live wells fitted on either side of the centerboard trunk. Seawater circulated through these wells by means of holes bored through the hull. Some of these schooners were also built with dry cargo holds and employed as light cargo haulers in coastal traders. These small Shoppies were 30 to 60 feet in length and were built with cabin accommodations to allow the crews to stay out for extended periods. Many had traditional flat, skiff-like bottoms, but the more seaworthy boats, like this model, had dead-rise V-shape in the after end of the hull, which improved their handling and sailing qualities. These boats became known as modified Shoppies. Now, this is HMS Beagle, an 1831 retrofit, scale 1 to 64 by Tony Malia in 2009, to celebrate the 200th anniversary of Charles Darwin, who sailed on this vessel. This is a day sailor by Cap Purrington, scale 3/4 of an inch to a foot. It's from a Freedom Song kit, and its type was a Herreshoff Bullseye. This vessel was a proposed Revolutionary War cutter called the Spy, for the defense of Lake Champlain. This is a scratch build by Cap Purrington, 1/4 of an inch to a foot. The lines were taken from Chappelle. It was actually never built, but it was the first effort of Cap in doing a diorama.
Right now, they started here.
Okay, this is a Gloucester fishing dory by Cap Purrington, scale 3/4 of an inch to a foot. It was a 16-foot rowing built in a class conducted by the Custom House Maritime Museum with the late Jack Farrell. Its construction is pine wood with just a wood sealer, and it's 100% scratch built. Okay, this is the No Man's Land boat by Cap Purrington, scale 1/2 inch to the foot. These boats primarily built to fish off the southwest side of Martha's Vineyard. It was actually a locality called no man's land off Martha's Vineyard, and this is where these boats would go. It was a double ender. It was hauled in daily on rollers. This is a scratch build, and believe it or not, the material used by Cap on this one was the cardboard you get when you buy a new shirt. Okay, this is the Wasp by Cap Purrington, scale 3/16 of an inch to a foot, scratch build, and this is a Revolutionary War ship around 1814, built in Newburyport and captained by William Blakely. And this was a sloop of war, so it didn't have a captain, it had a commander. A larger ship would have required a captain, so to save money, we called it a sloop of war, and it only needed a commander.
Okay.
This is St. Columba's Cora. Jim Norton built this. It's scratch built, scale 1/24. In 563 AD, the Irish monk St. Columba went into exile, traveling in a 36-foot cara to the island of Iona, or what is now Scotland. He established a monastery there with the goal of converting the pagan Picts and Scots to Christianity. This model of Columba's Cora was built using authentic 6th century Cora building materials. The hull construction started with upper and lower gunnels connected by short stanchions, creating a strong girdle-like structure. The hull itself was shaped by inserting bent ribs into slots in the lower gunnel and tying long laths to the ribs with artificial sinew. This frame was then covered with a leather skin made of hand-sewn hides. Oars, masts, and sails completed the model. St. Columba was portrayed at the bow, releasing a symbolic dove before the voyage, while another monk patiently awaits at the stern. Okay, this is HMS Bellerophon. It's a Tony Mallier scratch-built model, scale 1/144. Built in 1780, a 74-gun ship of the line of the Arrogant class. Scratch-built Admiralty board model under construction. The hull is dogwood, planking is pine, and the decks are maple. HMS Bellerophon fought at the Battle of the Nile and Trafalgar. Napoleon Bonaparte surrendered on board and was taken off Plymouth Sound before being exiled to St. Helena in another ship. And you can see Mr. Napoleon standing right there on the deck.
We have a bright flashlight over here. You can shine through the back of there to see the deck layout. That is really deceiving. Yeah. If you come back here, you'll be able to see what the deck's like and where the masts went and all that.
This is a friendship sloop, scratch built by Kevin Cody. It's in a Christmas ornament. And the medium is glazer's putty, and the wood itself is more than likely pine.
Well, he said it was. Because he had to make sure that everything was exactly right, so when it was reflected,
Okay, this is my model of a triple cockpit, double-ended speedboat. It's a Dumas kit that was of a boat called the Typhoon that I'd modified in some ways to suit my taste. The Typhoon was built in 1929, and as I said, this model's generic version of that. She was built to be the type that they raced in the Gold Cup races at the time. And this one has radio equipment in it and a sound system that we're not going to play right now. And here's some of the details of the components that are in it to operate the boat.
Okay, this is Newsboy. It's a work in progress by Marshall Gaffney. Scratch built, scale 3/16 of an inch to a foot. Solid hull construction. It was a brigantine schooner designed by Denison Lawler and built in Owl's Head, Maine at Adam and Brown Yard in 1854. She traded lumber to the Mediterranean, and then olive oil and wine to the West Indies, and rum back to New England. It's now in his second year of building.
oh yeah, it's an exact replica.
sometimes he does a class.
Oh, really?
And actually, he made
This is a steam trawler by Lloyd Sanborn. It's an A.J. Fisher kit, scale 1/8 of an inch to a foot. These steam trawlers are used for fishing by dragging a wide-mouth fishing net over the sea bottom. Lloyd is a member of the Peabody group, and I'm going to assume that this boat was probably built in Peabody by Lloyd as a member of that group. This is Wild Pigeon, the original builder unknown. This is a restoration by Bill Partridge. Scale 5/32 of an inch to a foot. I'm sorry, 5/32 of an inch equals an inch. The history is a medium clipper ship built at Portsmouth, New Hampshire in 1851. George Raines launched the clipper ship Wild Pigeon during the late summer of 1851. The registered dimensions were 170 by 35 by 20, 996 registered tons. The model is an antique hull model. This model of Wild Pigeon was made around the 1930s, most likely scratch built. The model was obtained many years ago by Peel Craftsman in poor condition. The model was recently restored to its present condition without mast and rigging, which appeared to be the intent of the original maker. Okay, this is a scratch-built Bounty launch with crew by James Norton. On April 28, 1789, Fletcher Christian led a mutiny on the HMAV Bounty on its way back to England with a shipload of breadfruit from Tahiti. William Bly, the captain of the Bounty, and 18 men loyal to him were set adrift on the Bounty's launch. In this 23-foot-long, severely overloaded boat, Bly made a 3,500 nautical mile voyage ending in Timor on June 14, 1789. This model is intended to show the crowded conditions on the launch, and the activities of the men are based on descriptions from Bly's journal of the launch voyage. Okay, this is the Oseberg Viking longship built by Mike Swanson. It's actually kit built. Its scale is 1:50. Preserved for 1,000 years in the blue clay of Oseberg, Norway, this 9th century Viking longship was excavated in 1904 and today resides in the Viking Ship Museum in Oslo, Norway. I took the colorful paint scheme from a replica Viking ship recently built in Denmark. When the ship was excavated, they found a Viking princess and her slave buried on the ship with a lot of provisions that she would have needed when she went up to Valhalla. This is San Pablo. Philip Fournier, another modeler from the Peabody group, built this scratch-built model, scale 1/4 of an inch to a foot. The real San Pablo was built in 1964 for the movie Sand Pebbles. It was loosely based on an actual river gunboat, Panay, but until the Panay, the San Pablo only had a single stack. This model was built in 2015 without the benefit of traditional plans, so the modeler had to create plans based on similar vessels, consulting with other modelers, and of course, several viewings of the Steve McQueen classic movie.
Take a look around.
I went to the actually thoroughly.
Well, you come to the wrong person.
Basically,
He wants to fix somebody's brain. You come to the wrong guy.
Thank you.
This is Skipjack by John Williamson. It's a Midwest kit, scales 7/16 of an inch to a foot. This model was built over an 18-month period ending in July of 2017. The Skipjack is the last working sailboat to ply the American waters in any significant numbers. They worked in the Chesapeake Bay area dredging for oysters, often operated by poachers. Their highly raked masts and large sail area gave them the power necessary to haul up the dredging equipment. At the turn of the 20th century, approximately 2,000 skipjacks comprised the oyster fleet. There are now less than 40 remaining in the U.S. This is a typical pilot cutter. This is built by Lloyd Sanborn. Once again, a member of the Peabody group, scale 1/4 of an inch to a foot. Scratch built.
I'm looking for a spot half to a foot scale that illuminates. I've got a smart.
This is Miss Lou by Bill Partridge. It's an A.J. Fisher kit, scale 1/4 of an inch to a foot. The Miss Lou model was made from a classic solid hull wooden ship by A.J. Fisher. The wooden ship kit by A.J. Fisher. During the period from 1870 to 1930, the shipyards of Biloxi, Mississippi produced over 253 sailing schooners for fishing and the freight industry. The Miss Lou represents the apex of traditional flat-bottom centerboard Biloxi-style schooners of the Gulf Coast. She was built by the famed boatyard of Anson Hoyley in 1930. She measured 70 feet long and weighed 42 tons and carried Hoyley's famous clipper bow and curved transom. The Miss Lou story came to an official end when she was broken up in 1971. This is Dream, scratch-built by Rob Napier, scale 3/8 of an inch to a foot. Dream, American pilot schooner and yacht. Isaac Webb designed and built Dream in New York in 1832. In 1834, Boston's Robert Bennett Forbes purchased her for a yacht. When idle, she served as a pilot boat. In about 1836, she was sold to New Yorker George L. Schuyler, and she was later in the charter fleet of the New York Yacht Club in 1944. Lines were lofted from Webb's original offsets at the Webb Institute of Naval Architecture. Spar dimensions, colors, and rigging are from contemporary newspapers and artwork, notably a Robert Salmon painting. Hull length is 17 and 7/8 inches. Hull is mahogany below the waterline and black painted basswood above. Decking is basswood. Deckhouse joinery is accurate, windows are glazed. Spars are boxwood. All blocks are built up. Rigging is linen. Some lines are hand-laid. Knotwork includes proper splicing, whipping, and service. All colors are acrylics. Okay, this is a Dornsey Tournament Fisherman by Bob Precioso. He's a member of the USS Constitution Model Shipwright Guild. This is a modified kit. It's radio controlled with 2 electric motors, fiberglass hull, wood decks and cabin, single plank teak deck, running gear and railing fittings are scratch built. Took approximately 300 hours.
Was roughly based on Crowley. She was a destroyer escort built in Mare Island in 1943. She served in the Pacific as an escort and did submarine duty, anti-submarine work, earned a number of battle stars. It was a change of pace for a ship and bottle to have a World War II warship rather than typical sticks and strings, as they say.
Okay, this is a boat submitted by Dick Boucher. It's called the Boucher Launch. It was a 48-inch powerboat Barracuda from plans and a kit of parts supplied by the H.E. Boucher Company. 4-cylinder marine engine, boiler, and blowtorch. It was purchased by Robin Neal in 1973 at an auction at Owl's Head Museum in Maine and restored by Robin in 1973. The boat and engine date from the late 1920s. It's currently owned by Dick Boucher.
Keep it going.
I think get one from the bow here.
Yeah. This is an armed Virginia sloop by Michael Andrade. It's a modified kit, scale 1/48. The sloop was designed and built in the mid-18th century, probably for the merchant trade. It appears to be an amalgam of the Virginia sloops and concurrent English cutters. Due to the timing, location, and apparent speed and maneuverability of the sloop, it was likely that it was used as a privateer during the American Revolution.
Yeah, it was something really.
This is the Jeremiah O'Brien, a famous Liberty ship actually, scratch built by Robin Neal, scale 1/8 inch to a foot. During World War II, nearly 1 million men and women working in American shipyards turned out 2,700 Liberty ships. It took an average of 45 days to finish each ship, and the cargo carried in their holds supplied the Allied war effort around the world. Modeler Robin Neal made 3 visits to the original Jeremiah O'Brien in San Francisco and made extensive measurements and photographs on which to base this model. It will eventually feature a live steam engine once a boiler is constructed.
I have a number 2. They're all the old wooden.
Except for this one. cargo ship called American something. And
Sea Scout, American
yeah,
Scout?
American Scout. And
American Express.
Huh?
American
Express, yeah. And I found the kit over here in Worcester at a guy's place, and I went over and looked at it. After I looked at it, I said, "No, I think I'm building this." Just, you know, it's this long.
Yeah.
This is Glad Tidings, built by Ralph Cooper. It's a model shipways kit, scale 1 to 24. Glad Tidings is an example of a Pinky schooner, one of the oldest types of New England fishing and trading boats. Pinky describes a boat with a narrow stern and overhanging false counter. The name derives from the 15th century Dutch word pinke, meaning narrow. They were very popular and ruled the New England's fisheries from 1815 to 1840, before the advent of the Gloucester schooners. Since the Pinky is a graceful and seagoing boat, it was brought back as a pleasure craft in the late 1900s. Today you can cruise on the Fame in Salem Harbor to experience sailing in this type of craft. Glad Tidings was designed by and built for the famous nautical historian Howard Chappell, former curator at the Smithsonian. It was built by Roger Sawyer of Millbridge, Maine, and launched in 1937. Its length was 39 feet, which had a beam of 10 feet 4 inches and a draft of 6 feet. This is Cutter Mermaid by Ralph Cooper. It's a modeler's shipyard kit, scale 1 to 48. Cutter Mermaid was built of teak in Calcutta and commissioned in 1817. For 3 years, Lieutenant Philip Parker King, RN, used the Mermaid for the task of exploring and surveying the coast of Australia. Mermaid made 3 voyages under King's command. The 3rd voyage involved a complete circumnavigation of the Australian mainland. In May 1918, Mermaid sailed north, conducting the first reliable survey of the Great Barrier Reef inner route, opening it to commercial traffic. King ran running surveys along the entire coastline until, with Mermaid leaking badly, they stopped at Careening Bay, named by King. There the hull was patched up. King carved HMC Mermaid 1820 on the single baobab tree at the rear of the bay. This historic graffiti remains to this day. Mermaid sailed and entered the calm waters of Sydney Cove on 9 December 1820, some 25 weeks and 3 days since sailing, having circumnavigated the continent. Unfortunately, ironically, she ran aground in the very route she had opened to shipping off the present site of Cairns in 1829 and was lost. In January 2009, the wreck of the Mermaid was found by a team of marine archaeologists from the Australian National Maritime Museum. The site of the wreck has now been declared a Maritime Heritage Site. USS Lexington, CV-2, by Ray Crean, a modified kit, scale 1 to 350. The aircraft carrier USS Lexington was at sea in the Pacific when Pearl Harbor was attacked in 1941. She became active in island raids and in 1942 teamed with the USS Yorktown in the Battle of Coral Sea, the first naval engagement in history in which the participating ships never sighted each other. Lexington was damaged in the battle when sparks for a generator ignited leaking gas fumes, causing uncontrollable fires. The crew was disembarked and the ship scuttled to prevent capture by the Japanese. In total, 2,735 crewmen were saved. Lexington sank on May 8, 1942. This is a Seconnet Day Sailor by Alan Bodnar, a modified kit, scale 1/2 inch to a foot. Created as a Club 1 design, the Seconnet was designed in 1937 for the Seconnet Yacht Club in Little Compton, Rhode Island. Having a specific boat designed for a club to use in racing was very popular in the 30s. As pretty to look at as she was to sail, the Seconnet featured a heavy displacement hull with a deep keel for additional stability, high freeboard for a dry ride, modest sail area, and a spacious open cockpit protected by high coamings and watertight bulkheads fore and aft, providing a very safe day sailor. This model was built from a modified kit at a leisurely pace over many months. One of the great pleasures and lessons of model shipbuilding is the realization that you can make an object of beauty in spite of the flaws and imperfections that leave their mark on the finished product. This is a Sea Bright Skiff by Alan Bodnar. It's a kit, scale 3/4 inch to a foot. The Sea Bright Skiff dates back to mid-1800s along the North Jersey shore, where it was first used for fishing and life-saving in a region where shipwrecks were common. The heavy Atlantic surf and the distance to calm inlets required a strong, well-balanced boat that could be launched safely into the waves. One of the foremost modern builders of Sea-Bright skiff was Charles Hankins, 1925 to 2003, who handcrafted these boats of New Jersey cedar and green oak in the same high-ceiling stone workshop where he learned the craft from his father. The Sea-Bright skiff influenced the design of many boats to follow, as some styles evolved to carry motors and heavy cargo. Some served as rum runners during Prohibition. Although fiberglass replaced traditional wooden construction, these skiffs are still used as patrol and life-saving boats along the New Jersey shore. Alan Bodnar built this model inspired by boyhood memories of these boats on New Jersey beaches. This is a Saint boat by Robin Neal, scratch-built. It's a 23-foot mahogany runabout. A number of these boats were to be built as tenders for large yachts. The Boatyard Commission required the model to be built to original plans. The model was built for boat shows in Hong Kong and the Far East.
I mean, he's very nice.
This is the North American Canoe by Roy Crane, modified kit, scale 1 inch to the foot. This model is a design variation of a kit by Midwest products named Indian Girl Canoe. The canoe was a truly North American design, having unique abilities to navigate shallow waterways that preceded highways. Lightweight allows it to be carried between waterways. The simplicity and flowing form is almost sculptural in design. Paddles known as beaver tail paddles have been chosen because they reflect the broad curves of the hull of the boat, as compared to some of the more modern squared-off paddles in use today.
Okay, this is the Bluenose. It's built by me, Roy Crane. And this is a scratch-built model. The scale is 1/4 inch equals a foot. It was built from plans by P.F. Elsner, and with a plank-on frame practicum by Gene Bodnar. One side of the model is unfinished, displaying the rib and keel construction below the waterline, and the other side is finished. The Bluenose was built by Smith and Ruland and launched in Lunenburg, Nova Scotia on March 26, 1921. She was built as a racing ship and fishing vessel in response to the defeat of the Nova Scotian fishing schooner Delawana by the Gloucester fishing schooner Esperanto in 1920. Bluenose, a nickname for Nova Scotians, defeated the Gloucester fishing schooner Elsie to return the International Fisherman's Trophy to Nova Scotia. In 1930, she was defeated 2-0 off of Gloucester by the fishing schooner Gertrude Thibault. Over the next 7 years of racing, no challenger could take the title from her.
And this is the finished side, fully planked.
Beautiful work. Thank you for that.
Charlie, thank you very much for the contribution. We appreciate that.
Okay, this is Ingomar, Ship in a Bottle. It's produced by David Zucker. It was a class that he had taken from Alex Bellinger. The scale was 1 to 300. The medium for the C is glazer's putty with artist oils. The hull is made out of pine, and the sails can be made out of different media. This looks like it was probably some kind of a parchment paper. I know they also use silk span sometimes for these things. This is Alexandra by Robin Neal. It's a steam launch, remote control, twin-cylinder steam engine. This is a Victoria-era steam launch. Had a high-pressure boiler, butane-fired, twin-cylinder steam plant, radio-controlled steam valve and rudder.
I stopped in here, last year, I guess.
We've done, this is our third year. Good to still keep coming back.
Yeah.
The models do change too.
Yeah, I've noticed, yeah.
This is called the Good Little Skiff by Dick Boucher. It was a sailing skiff designed by Captain R.D. Pete Culler in 1970. Another model by Dick Boucher. This is a Blue Jacket Pram and Dory, kit built.
8 o'clock Saturday morning. I'm up in Rye.
Okay, well, I come down for 3 or 4.
This is a Chesapeake Bay Flatty built by Dick Boucher. It was a kit. It was a scale is 3/8 of an inch to a foot. This was a turn-of-the-century workboat used along the coast of Virginia and North Carolina to carry produce down shoal creeks to market and for hauling oysters from shallow flats and bars.
Participate a little bit with
The kit was courtesy of Midwest Products.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
This is a Taurus steam tugboat. It was a kit made out of wood by David Zucker. The scale is HO scale.
Yeah, I've met him before, he lived in a number of keep.
Okay, this is HMS Fly built by Robin Neal. This is a modified kit. The Fly was a 6th raider. The Swan class ship sloop launched at Sheerness Dockyard in 1776. HMS Fly served in the West Indies and North Sea during the American Revolution. She performed various escort and courier duties during the French Revolutionary Wars, but was lost with all hands off Newfoundland in 1802. Modeler Robin Neal built this version out of mahogany and cherry. The hand-tied ratlins include 2,440 knots.
Oh, I get the stern light here. Okay, that's cool.
And the battery pack for that is in here. Very clever.
Very clever.
Very clever design.
The rigging, I like the way it fans out to the crow's nest.
Yeah, just gorgeous rigging.
Precise models, fine models,
This is a gentleman's racer built from scratch by Bob Precioso, one of the members of the USS Constitution Model Shipwright Guild. It's a 1930s gentleman's racer, modified Century Thunderbolt. Single planked with Honduras mahogany, fittings made of brass and chrome plated. It's radio controlled with water-cooled brushless motor. West system on outside and inside, approximately 400 hours to complete.
that restaurant in Portsmouth. They sold off the place, they auctioned everything off
The sign's still there.
12, 14 years ago. Yeah, they refurbished the sign. It's
Okay.
This is one of many boats built by Ed Parent of Civil War vintage. This is the USS Red Rover, scratch-built, scale 1 to 240. This 650-ton sidewheel steamer was built in 1859 at Cape Girardeau, Missouri. It was a Confederate barrack ship until captured by the U.S. Navy. After refit, it became the first Navy hospital ship serving the Mississippi Squadron until the Civil War's end. Her medical complement included the first female nurses to serve aboard a Navy ship. They were from the Catholic Order Sisters of the Holy Cross. In addition to caring for and transporting sick and wounded men, she provided medical supplies to Navy ships in the Western rivers. This is USS Water Witch, also built by Ed Parent, scratch-built, scale 1 to 240. The paddle wheel ship Water Witch measured 150 feet by 22 feet with a displacement of 450 tons at a shallow 7-foot 10-inch draft. She was rigged as a topsail schooner with a light armament of one 30-pounder rifle and 4 32-pounders. The vessel showed good early performance. Even when in poor trim, she ran 8.7 knots, using 631 tons of coal per hour. She was a useful vessel, especially in service in shallow South American rivers. While surveying the Rio de Plata in 1855, she was fired upon, resulting in an American punitive expedition against Paraguay. During the Civil War, she saw duty on the Atlantic until she was captured in June 1864 by the Confederates. She was later burned to prevent her recapture in December 1864 near Savannah, Georgia. This is Css Shenandoah, a Confederate commerce raider built by Robin Neal, scratch-built, quarter scale, quarter-inch to the foot. She was launched in Scotland as a steam auxiliary fast clipper, the Sea King, in 1863. She was purchased by the Confederacy and heavily armed as a commerce raider, whose mission was to sink the New Bedford whaling fleet. She sank 32 Union ships. The model is completely scratch-built, including the model steam plant.
Sections. You know, so I want to put these sections together like this. Without putting planking. Right. So I did, I had like little quarter-inch sticks and just lay down with enough space, I could slip the section and it would stand up.
The only reason we can see the steam engine in this is that the cabins have been removed.
Right.
Otherwise, they're not visible.
So I made extra on the top side of the deck, give myself a flat base. And with the extra, and I put on a steel piece, to hold it all together. And the rubber piece to hold all together at the top, right? Transom piece on the back.
This is Pride of Baltimore 2 by Dave DeInnocentis. Model ship weighs kit scale 1 to 64. This is a replica of a Baltimore clipper privateer that sailed in the War of 1812. The city of Baltimore commissioned the Pride of Baltimore II to serve as a goodwill ambassador for the city. It was launched in 1989. The first Pride of Baltimore had been lost in a squall 3 years prior. This model was the second completed model, and it took about a year to construct. It's plank on bulkhead construction. The Pride's brilliant green hull was a camera favorite during the parade of tall ships in Boston during the month of June.
Oh, you are? Why? Actually, I'm going to go bring the signs in.
Yes.
Very nice to talk to you. You're welcome to come anytime you like. Who I was, right?
This is a Navy mortar boat, another scratch-built model from Lloyd Sanborn of the Peabody Club, scale 1/8 of an inch to a foot. It's a Civil War era boat. These mortar boats were used to shell enemy fortifications from the rivers.
So I looked at my tag to see what they had put down.
That's good.
Okay, this is HMS Victory. This started off some 40 years ago as a Mantua kit that I purchased at Bliss Marine, and it was heavily modified in as much as the plans I found not to be particularly accurate. So the plans were supplemented with C. Nepean Longridge's book, Anatomy of Nelson Ships, and a book about HMS Victory from the Anatomy of the Ship series. So this one took approximately 5 years of construction, and as most people know, it was the flagship of Lord Nelson during the Battle of Trafalgar, and he was killed on the quarterdeck during the battle, having been shot by a French sniper. This was a first-rate ship of the line, rigged out with 102 cannons during the Battle of Trafalgar. It's preserved today at Portsmouth Royal Dockyard in Portsmouth, England. It's the oldest commissioned warship in the world, but not the oldest commissioned warship still afloat, that honor belonging to the Constitution. This is HMS Bounty by Mike Swanson. Modified kit, scale 1 to 48. Bounty was an armed transport ship that began its life as a collier named Bethia. It was refitted by the British Admiralty in 1787 and renamed Bounty, and the mission was to transport breadfruit plants to the West Indies. On the morning of 28 April 1789, while the ship lay off the shore, part of her crew mutinied under the leadership of Fletcher Christian, and Captain William Bligh and 18 loyal followers were set adrift in a 23-foot open launch. This model is a modified kit where 90% of the ship's details were scratch-built. The original kit was I believe it was a Corel kit, and I didn't like the plans or most of the materials in it, so I decided after I put the keel, the cutwater, and the bulkheads together that I would do everything else from scratch. But I am using the fittings. The fittings were good. The first course of planking is basswood, and the second is mahogany. The hull is coppered below the waterline. All deck furniture is walnut. And this obviously is a work in progress. As you can see, only the foremast has been completed, and the foretopmast is only partially built.
Well, these are traditional half hulls. This is a 10 Raider. She was actually built up in, I think up in Ohio, and won a number of races up there. That's the first half hull I ever made. And this Jonesport up here, it's a traditional lobster boat. She's skeg down built, and very fast, very stable, great boats. Next boat is Skimmer. She was a sandbagger, raced in New York, and very, very fast. They used to have sand inside them, and they'd move the bags of sand from side to side for a weight. And the bottom one is a half hull that is in process. And it's a bunch of different woods put together, and mostly pine on the top, and mahogany, and cherry, and one other type of wood. I'm not too sure what it is.
This is White Wings, scratch-built half hull by Walt Nybaum, scale 1/4 inch to the foot. In the early 21st century, Joel White designed a boat designated as W76. It was intended as a replacement for aging designs such as the New York 50. It was intended that a class of these would be built as identical boats for match racing. The demand for a large, single-purpose racing boat was overestimated, and only 2 were built, White Wings and Wild Horses. Shadow, another scratch-built half hull by Walt Nybaum, scale 1/2 inch to the foot. Shadow was a 34-foot racing sloop that was designated by Nathaniel Herreshoff in 1870 as a compromise of British deep draft sailing vessels and American shallow vessels. It's scratch-built in walnut and maple. This is a Chesapeake Bay Flatty built by Kevin Cody from a kit. Scale is 3/8 of an inch to a foot.
To the right there, sir.
Around the turn of the century, a flat-bottom workboat known as the Flatty was used extensively along the coast of Virginia and North Carolina for carrying loads of produce down shoal creeks to market and for hauling oysters from the flats and bars. Because of their simple lines, Flatties could be easily and cheaply built. Their light draft, flat bottoms, and retractable centerboards allowed these boats to work in shallow water. These qualities made Flatties ideal for working the waters of the Chesapeake Bay and Pimlico Sound. Depending on the builder's intended use, Flatties generally ranged in size from 20 to 30 feet in length. It was customary in working boats of this type to bring the tack, the bottom front of the jib sail, and the forestay to the sternhead, and as on this model. However, some Flatties had short bowsprits spiked to the deck, which allowed a larger jib to be carried. The centerboards of these boats pivoted on a large bolt and could be retracted into the hull by hauling on a line that passed over a block on the cabin roof. And you can see the progression, if you take that class that Bill Partridge was offering, you can see the progression as you start the kit here on the left and work your way through the various stages of construction.
I would expect tomorrow would be that a little bit better, and I would expect Saturday would be better. It's so gratifying, the reception.
To a completed Flatty. This is Flying Dutchman, scratch-built model of the Flying Dutchman by Tony Mallia, scale 1 to 96. This was constructed from a dogwood tree fallen in Storm Sandy, and the model is based on the 17th century Dutch Floite Deflinger. The legend of the Flying Dutchman tells of Captain Vanderdecker, who was doomed to sail around the Cape of Good Hope forever for cursing the wind. He hails other ships to try to get letters sent home. There's an optical illusion on this ship. It's actually a half a ship mounted up against a reflective surface, not a mirror, because if you mounted it against a mirror, you wouldn't be able to see the deck work on the other side. So it's a reflective sheet that still allows the reflection of the ship so that it appears as a full ship. But when you come around the other side, you can see the cabin details that aren't visible from this side.
Thank you very much.
This is a 21.5 Lucille catboat by John Ruggiero, very talented carver. The scratch built, scale is 1 inch to the foot. The boat was originally built in 1894, and this model is consisted of basswood and mahogany. The skipper and the waves were also carved by John.
I'm going to get away with it tonight. I'll see you guys tomorrow.
Okay, we're pulling out, okay?
Okay, we're all set. Uss Marblehead from Ray Crean, scratch built, scale 1 to 295. USS Marblehead was commissioned on September 8, 1924, one of 10 Omaha Scout cruisers. At the beginning of World War II, the ship was stationed in the Philippines. On February 4, 1942, a Japanese attack killed 15 and wounded 34 of her crew. After repairs, the ship remained on active duty until the end of the war and was decommissioned on November 1, 1945. The model is based on photographs of the ship at the beginning of World War II. The entire model is made of styrene sheet and stretched spruce. There are no commercial fittings. This is RM Pola, an Italian warship, by Ray Crean. It's a modified kit, scale 1 to 350. Built by the Italian Navy prior to World War II, Pola's unusual design, the bridgework was faired into the forward stack, provided the extra space needed to house the flagship's command staff and equipment. British battleships sank Pola in March 1941 during the Battle of Cape Matapan off the southern tip of Greece. Ray Crean heavily modified a motorized toy to produce this model. He scratch-built most of the upper works. The model's paint scheme represents an early war gray camouflage, and the red and white stripes painted near the bow are aircraft recognition signs.
This is Nina, and she's a 10-rater. She was born in England in 1932 by my father, sailed by him in Liverpool, England. We kept her through the war, and I actually sailed her in the Round Pond in England, in Hyde Park, when I was 10 years old. I restored it after my father died, and have sailed her once since, and she leaks like a sieve.
Leaks like a sieve.
Very good. I like that. I didn't know the history of action myself either, so that's good.
And that's the lead. See the lead?
I see the lead on that keel.
It's heavy. It's heavy.
Composite hull. Just put it together. There's no big deal with it. Paint it. And it's a beautiful sailing little ship. I love it, especially when it's a very calm evening on a pond and the only movement is the air coming down off the valley and this thing's sailing. But when I'm sailing it and it heels over, I get nervous. There's a whole box of BBs in the keel for the weight. And it's radar controlled. Did I mention it was radar controlled?
You did now.
All right, so it's radar controlled. And that's about the size of it. It's just
How long ago?
matter of weeks. Matter of weeks.
Now, the kit didn't come with the planking.
Yeah, no,
Well, that's
just as, you know.
this kit has become more sophisticated since I built my version of it,
Yeah.
because it didn't have all that.
I think that's decals I had to glue in there. Self-sticky type things.
Let me get around and get a shot from the front of the bow here.
So this is a Miss Billy plank on bulkhead. She's a ketch and fiberglass on the outside, built for radio control. And I made the sails and
Answers are 25 cents.
the boat.
Correct
So it's got ballast in the bottom, and all these things come off to access the radio, and there's a spare set of sails in there. And they carry a good stock of Guinness in these barrels. And the rudder works. It's hooked up to no servo, but the rudders run back into here. And that's it.
How long did it take you to build a rudder?
This project was a 1.5-year project. It was a lot more difficult than I thought. It just went on and on. And interestingly, the covering is balsa wood, where the grain runs lengthwise, so it bends easily. And then when you through that, you cover with fiberglass matting and epoxy, pretty heavy coating. And it's designed for pond operation. and I've never had it in the water. And it's called Miss Millie because our golden retriever we had for 12 years died when I was just finishing up this boat, so it's kind of a sad time for us.
Okay, this is a Herreshoff Buzzards Bay boat built by Walt Marblehead, scale 1 inch to the foot. It's also known as an H12 and a half after its water length. It was launched in 1914 and 1943.
You're going to have to play it.
Yeah, okay, this is a 16-foot melon seed skiff by John Ruggiero. Scratch built, scale 1.13 inches to the foot. It's an era 1900 scratch built wood hull with a carved couple, fiberglass sail, and music was added to the waves and to the tune of Cruising Down the River one Sunday afternoon. This whaling launch by Walt Marblehead, scale 1/4 inch to a foot. It's a generic type of boat launched from the beaches in the Caribbean during the whale migration season of the 19th century.
Try to keep the shine off.
Yeah.
The thing is that I received my father when he said vicious, easy then he said
Okay, this rig was developed by Steve Riddler, and one of our members who's also a rigger on the Constitution. So this is an actual heart taken from USS Constitution, made of lignum vitae, and it's got a good demonstration of what worming, parceling, and serving looks like in some of this standing rigging. And this is a sheet actually taken from the Constitution, a copper sheet that was installed in 1927.
All right, winding things up here. This is a boat that was donated to the club as a raffle prize by Robin Neal. And she's called the Scottish Maid.
No, I'm not trying to get by.
Oh, okay.
And it's a very pretty boat. And we've been collecting raffle money for the steeple for the church fund.
Wow.